Welcome back to the Strategic Veteran Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Peters, and today we're diving into a story of resilience, innovation, and strategic growth with our guest, Zach Walker. After serving 3 years in the Army, Zach carried his military-driven grit into entrepreneurship. Both significant challenges and substantial successes mark his journey. Zach has built a career on the backbone of persistence, failing multiple times but always getting back up stronger. He founded Unicorn, a company revolutionizing how startups and businesses scale by providing fractional on-demand revenue pod teams across crucial growth sectors like in-demand generation, sales, and revenue operations. Zach's expertise has empowered multi-million-dollar businesses, engagements, and cultivated award-winning sales teams that consistently exceed revenue targets. Today, he'll share how he turned early setbacks into stepping stones, his vision for creating scalable growth solutions, and the powerful lessons he's learned. So let's welcome Zach Walker, a true embodiment of what it means to be a strategic veteran, an entrepreneur driven by purpose, innovation, and courage to lead. Zach, brother, welcome to the show, man.
Man, what an introduction. Thank you so much for those kind words. I definitely have a career marked by resilience. There's no doubt about that. But I find myself typically recovering from my own undoing. A lot of people seem to think that the world's out to get them. I can assure you, I've been out to get myself. And so it's been a lot of that for sure. But joining the Army definitely saved my life and taught me more than I ever wanted to know, probably. But yeah, man, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, dude. So let's jump right in, man. Sure. Let's talk about where you grew up and what inspired you to join. And you kind of got ahead of yourself and let us know that the Army saved your life. But I think it's important to paint that picture. So floor is yours, man.
Yeah, man. So I grew up in Alabama, rural environment. When I was young, we moved to Northern Virginia. So we lived about 25 minutes out of Washington, D.C. And I was in Miss Baker's 9th grade science class when the Twin Towers fell. And my dad at the time was supposed to be in one of those government buildings. And turns out he had actually ended up at the Naval Yard that day and was not involved in any of that. But I was like the only kid in our class to like get a phone call out to like make sure, dad was okay. And then I grew up, my biological father was Command Sergeant Major, MP in the Army. And just, a lot of that influenced probably the way that I was raised. My stepfather, not a veteran, his father was, but he was an Olympic gymnast. And so that same level of drive and determination. And I mean, I just was surrounded by all that stuff. And being in the nation's capital for some of the craziest events. I mean, the Beltway sniper incident.
Oh God, I forgot about that. That's where the father and son were in the trunk, just picking people off, right? Yeah, I forgot all about that.
Yeah, they canceled we had we would walk in a zigzag, which after going to the military and understanding how to shoot, it's like, wait a minute, that
doesn't make sense, right?
but like we would do all kinds of. They canceled our school outdoor events, and that was a huge part of our life. And then watching the towers fall, one of the crazy things, looking back at it now as an adult, it's hard to wrap my mind around the amount of people in our orbit that were shaping the world's politics on a day in, day out basis. Guys who worked for, ABC company and took business trips with firearms to places that no one knew about, where if something would have happened, they would have, gone down in a plane crash, right? Stuff like that. Just being around all of these movers and shakers in the military and law enforcement and just that community. When the Pentagon was hit, the nose of the plane entered into the office of a deacon at the church where we went. My childhood hero, his name was Bob Roth. He was with the FBI. He later on, he came to be the very first FBI agent to be credited with cancer and dying from the exposure to the fuel and all of the things that he was one of the first people. He was driving down the Beltway, saw the plane, flipped a U, went back. And Larry Hinckley was the deacon's name. Larry Hinckley's badge was one of the first things that Bob found as he was digging through the rubble. And fortunately for Larry in the Pentagon, you don't go anywhere without a badge, and he did, and he couldn't get back to his office without his badge, and so he was diverted to go get whatever security protocol there is to get back to your office is what saved his life. But just being around all that stuff so closely, like I was a patriotic person, always have been, grew up in a very patriotic family. And I would like to say that being around all that is what drove me to the Army. But to be completely honest with you, I got arrested. And when I got bailed out of jail that morning, I went straight to the recruiter's office because I was like, might as well. My life's in the tank, right? Like I wish there was some noble cause or story. Certainly a patriotic person, certainly loved my time, but like the genesis to join was self-preservation in a lot of ways. And man, I'm so glad I did. I joined up. I was a 68 whiskey. I was a medic. So we went the infantry route. We were the only non-infantry in infantry basic training and on Fort Benning. And so it was a different experience for me. It was a great, man, I have so many stories.
What year did you go to basic?
Oh gosh, you would ask me that question.
Well, because our stories kind of parallel each other, right? So you were in 9th grade when the towers came down. I was a sophomore, so we're roughly the same age.
I was super old. I was much older when I went in. I've got an old. Let's see. I've got an old expired military ID from June of 13. So it was in that 12, 13 range that I went in. So this was my first ever. This is my first ever military ID that I keep in my wallet. So it had to be like 2012, 2013.
Okay. So you went in I was in 03 right after I graduated. I figured that was kind of maybe the direction you had gone, but
no, I went the direction of the party, and then had to revert back after partying landed me, in the old slammer there. So it was, too many stories for me to tell on a forum like this, but certainly, getting to basic and that shark attack, that very first time that you come off the bus and you go from the holding battalion down and
30th AG. Did you go to Benning?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. So 30th AG is purgatory.
They feed you all the good foods and the birds.
It is no way, shape, or form what you're about to go experience.
And I'm like, oh, this is great. This is basic. I'm golden. And I'm like a puddle of tears in the first 13 seconds, right? So it's like,
and then you get on the cattle truck, and then that's when reality really hits you. And
man.
Back when I did it, I remember thinking it was kind of funny, like you're yelling and screaming and making me toe this line, and like I'm laughing, and then I got punched in the stomach, literally punched in the stomach by a drill sergeant. It wasn't funny anymore.
Back when the Army was still the Army, but I digress. Benning was one of the best experiences of my life. I tell people all the time, if I could go back to basic training once a year, I would. There's nothing once you realize the game that's being played. And it took me, you're there for 13 weeks. It took me 8 of them probably to figure it out. By nature was a very sensitive, want to make people happy, want to please people kind of person. And that's not the best mentality going into that, because their whole goal is like you're never going to please them. That's the point.
Mm-hmm.
And so it took me a while to figure it out, but once I figured it out, I was like, wait a minute, first of all, I'm older than everybody there at the time. I went in when I was much older than I was 23 24, not 18, right? And so definitely a little bit more mature and able to deal with it. But I'm like, they've said the same thing to me that they've said to the last however many thousands of people, the same insults, the same jokes, the same everything. They don't mean any of it. Like,
they're just doing a job.
I guess one of the best illustrations of that, we got to the PX, like we got some chewing tobacco that we were able to. We found a guy who was a recycle and was kind of had some injury time, and he had, large cojones on him, and he made his way to the PX. And so we ended up with like a supply route of contraband that we had on a fairly regular basis. And multiple times throughout my time at Benning, they would call us to toe the line. They would walk literally right. It was in the wall. It was behind a brick. Like we had And they would walk right over there and they would stand there and they would question us about it, and they would smoke us and smoke us and smoke us and shower drill and smoke us and, all the things. And then they just walk away. Nobody would break. Nobody would say anything. At the end, at graduation, our very last formation in the bay, like toe the line, right? And they walk over, they pull the brick out, they pull everything out, and they throw it in the middle of the floor. And we're like, oh, we're all like, none of us are graduating. They're going to revoke our passes. Our families are on the way, and like, they're going to take this away from us. And they just died laughing. They're like, we've watched you do this the whole time. We didn't care. We just wanted, it was more an exercise in like, will you rat on your buddy? Right. Will you have your buddies back? And once you kind of wrap your mind around that, and you can build those bonds with those guys that you're suffering with. And that goes for every school in the Army. That goes for Army life or military life in general. And I think for me, that was a huge natural thing for me. The unnatural part was the physical side. I've always been a bigger person, and not fat by any stretch, but like, when I'm healthy, I'm big.
Yeah, I'm saying.
Broad shoulders, big. I was obese by the fat scale that the Army gives you,
which is bullshit,
which is crazy. And like push-ups and sit-ups for guys who weigh 225 pounds are a little more challenging. Sit-ups specifically were a challenge for me. Push-ups, fine, no big deal. Had a big up, but like the run.
Yeah, I was the same way, right? I used to tell people in the Army, like, I maxed my run once my entire career. So I was, and that was when I was fairly young before I got hurt a bunch. Sure. But push-ups and sit-ups, I'd max those in the first minute. It was running that got me. And then my time to shine would be on the rucks. I'm 6'3".
Yep.
I got long legs. I'm built to carry heavy shit, long distances. You're not going to fuck with me on a ruck, but you're going to fucking kill me on a run.
They'd throw a 240 Bravo at me and, hey, here you go, buddy. And I just hump it away. I mean, it doesn't bother me. I'll take your pack, my pack, your rifle, my rifle, and I'm good. But sit-ups were a challenge. They were always a challenge for me. And the drill sergeants knew that, and they honed in on that, and it became like, and so the one thing that I think I walked away from that has defined my life moving forward, I could make myself do anything for a period of time. Like, there's no amount of suffering beyond that will end your life. Like, if it's not going to kill you, you can do it for a period of time. Anything doesn't matter. Man,
it's such a good mentality to have. That's such a great
way to heaven ruck. Like when you on that final FTX and we had a first sergeant who Ranger Battalion. I mean, this guy was like, he was G.I. Joe. He was real life, the coolest first sergeant I've ever had in my life. But like, he was carrying everything we carried, and he jogged from the back to the front
the whole time
to the back, yelling at us, calling us every name under the sun, as he's like, the only thing he could have done to make it worse was like start smoking a cigarette while he was doing it. The guy never quit the whole 16 miles, right? Like it was wild. But again, I did it. And I think that mentality is carried over. It carried over into everything I've done in business. It's carried over into how I raised my son. And it's something I'm super, super proud to have learned. That's why I say I would go back every year. Now, would I have to dial back the physicality some because I'm old and I'm hurting and I've had 14 major surgeries? And like, yes, I wouldn't be able to do what I did. In fact, we had, what's the age? It's 32, right? Is the oldest you can be to go in, or it was at the time. It's 30.
I don't even know anymore. I know at one point we would let 40-year-olds in. During the surge, you could be 40 and come in.
Yeah, well, that was when they were throwing those $30,000, $50,000 bonuses to everybody and looking for, do you breathe? Can you tote a rifle? You're in. But this guy was in his mid-30s. He was the oldest age at the time. I'll never forget this. Week one, when you do that first obstacle course, and you've got to like walk the beam and climb the rope net and all that stuff. And like the mats they put at the bottom are those gym mats from like elementary school that are like
you guys had mats? We didn't have shit. We had puddles of mud underneath.
To be fair, they were this big, right? Like it was probably one of those CYA, somebody in your class fell and hurt themselves.
Of course.
Here's a quarter inch of padding. They'll be fine. Yeah. And I watched this dude fall and break his back, literally, and get like neck braced and backboarded out of there. That would be me now for sure. But I would still go back just to like get that reinvigoration of the discipline and all of that. But you know, my military story looks totally different. And this may be the first time I've ever really told it out loud, because it's something I'm not really like, I'm not a proud of and super, it's a spot of shame for me in a lot of ways, but also I feel like there was a blessing in it looking back at it now as a 37-year-old. So when I went in, like I told you, I just gotten arrested. It was a DWI. Like I didn't do anything crazy. I just was a partying 21-year-old kid that acted like an idiot. Right. And 22-year-old kid, whatever it was. And when I went in, I signed up before the court had time to actually like process everything. Right. So when they ran my background check and they did all that stuff, I was all clean. There was nothing in there yet because the court case hadn't been dispositioned, right?
So now you got to deal with this while you're on active duty.
So I'm literally leaving, getting on the plane, my phone rings, and it's my probation officer. And I'm at the airport, literally at the airport, about to get on a plane, and he's like, what's going on? I'm like, I joined the Army. He was like, you can't leave the state. And I was like, I'm at the airport. Like we have two options here. Either I'm in trouble with you or I'm in trouble with them. So like, I don't know how to handle this. I got super lucky. This guy ended up being a great man. He was like, look, you're better in your life. I know you're in a place where you're not going to do anything stupid. He was like, I'll work with you. I'll mail you your form, and you have to send it back once a month. Now, mind you, I'm on my way to Fort Benning for basic training.
You don't even have an address.
I'm not even permanent party. Like I'm nothing yet.
Yeah.
So we'd been at basic training for a month, and I will never, Drill Sergeant Chopper. I will never forget Drill Sergeant Chopper. Old tanker guy was hard as nails, bro. And he calls us all in for mail call, and you know everybody goes and sits down right there in front of the two-sided glass or two-way glass. And I'll never forget those bays at Fort Benning that you had to freaking, I don't know how many times we waxed those things, but we sit down, and Drill Sergeant Chopper pulls a piece of mail, and he goes, well, boys, looks like we've got a fugitive from justice. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm about to go to Fort Leavenworth for the rest of my life. Like it's over for me. Like I'm in my first month of basic. I'm still convinced that I've literally signed up for a cult and I'm in hell. Like I have no idea what's happening. And now all of a sudden I'm a fugitive from justice. And so they ran this whole thing out. Turns out they were super cool with it too. But like it became this whole deal where like so long story short, I graduated basic training, top of my class, like all the things, had a great time, loved it, went to AIT. You can't sit for the board, for the EMT board while you have a conviction active, right? Mm-hmm. So now I'm at AIT and I'm going through the training. I went through all the training and now I can't even sit for the board. So they ended up having to separate me, send me back here to Seagoville, Texas, to a reserve unit. And I ended up just staying there. So I was qualified as a medic, but I hadn't taken the EMT course. So I couldn't really do anything. I couldn't deploy. I couldn't go anywhere. They wouldn't send me back. The unit I got sent to was a soup sandwich. And it was, I don't know if you've ever been around a combat support hospital unit, a reserve cache, but it is nothing but a bunch of civilian physicians who make $5,000 a weekend to just come out and be a reserve doctor. Sure. Let me back up. Before I get in trouble here with all of our veteran community out there. Like in country, some of the best physicians in the world, saved a lot of lives. No disrespect for those guys there. But here, when they're not downrange, it's a totally different animal.
Well, and I'll say it for you. I don't care if I piss off the community. All of us active duty guys, particularly us infantry guys, know that the reserves and the guard are fucked up as football bats. Mm-hmm. I've not heard of one guy coming off active duty from the infantry getting to a reserve. I actually I have a business partner right now that's in the reserves in Georgia, and he fucking hates it. And he's a major. he hates it.
Wow.
He says it's so fucked up. He's like, I want back on active duty. I can't do this. This is stupid. So I'll say it for you. Like, they're stateside, they're fucked up. They're soup sandwiches, like you said.
So while I was at Fort Sam Houston, like, I had a lot of, I was a really great soldier. Like, I was a great medic. I had the respect of all the cadre. Like, they were all working to find a way to help me around this. We looked at reclassification. Like, I'll just go to the infantry for a little while. And the unit, because I had been assigned to this unit, they would not let me go. And so I literally spent my 3 years with no prospect of ever finishing anything, no reclassification, I just was a part of this reserve unit for 3 years. I served my time and I separated, right? And it was like the unit that I would have been assigned to, the medics that were there are no longer with us, right? And so there was a really tough deployment that they were on that they didn't come home from, right? And so looking back at it now, like, I was great at what I did. So there's a lot of
survivor's guilt.
Yeah, like, who could I have saved? What could I have done differently? And like that's tough to deal with. But also, like, I have a beautiful family now. And like, while on one hand, like, I wish I could have done all those things. And I feel like an imposter in some ways, that like my Army experience wasn't normal by most standards, right? But like, I'm also alive and I have a beautiful family and I work with veterans and I have an opportunity to help veterans get jobs. And I have an opportunity to help the guys that did go do the other stuff that I was unable to go do. And I get them and I understand them. And I've been through what they've been through up until the point where they went to the active duty and it looked different. Right. And so it's yeah, man, I don't know that I've ever told that story, like, super publicly before. And because of that shame and that guilt, but like, I did everything I knew how to do. My recruiter is still one of my best friends. He literally lives a mile from me now, and we hang out all the time. We do business together. Great friends, great friendships. It taught me a ton. But when you talk about a transition, like, my transition didn't look the same, but was as challenging as any other for different reasons. Because I didn't like, there was no like real hard transition. There was just like this, like, hey, your path was this, now it's this, now it's over. What are you going to do? Right. Like, there was no buildup of like, oh, I've spent all this time doing this and I've gone on these deployments and now all of a sudden I've got to stop. Mine was like, hey, you had a plan for the next 4 years and I planned on sticking around for a while. Yeah. So like, I planned on and now all of a sudden, like, that's taken from me. Now, granted, it was my decision led me down that path. But I don't want to say the Army, because it wasn't the Army. The combat support hospital I was assigned to really
didn't do you any favors.
It really boogered me up, because there were options for me. I could have gone active duty at any point in time. If they would have just let me go, I could have gone reclassed, gone active duty, and had a very normal experience. And then I could have reclassed to a medic because I had already completed the training minus the EMT board. So all I would have had to do is sit for the board, and then I could have been I could have had 2 MOSs, which would have been super cool, right? Like, the ability to do a lot of stuff. And so, I mean, I look back at my time in the Army very fondly from like, one, I needed it, man. Like, I would be dead or in jail. Like, there's no two ways about it. I was anything I could put in my body that didn't require a needle, and I was game. Hate needles, still do. But like, if it didn't require a needle, I was game. And that life was going to kill me. And so, super thankful for that. Some of the friendships, lifelong for sure. But on the other side, there's like, what if, and so it's,
Well, I would argue that that's part of your transition, right?
Sure.
Survivor's guilt it's a big one, man. I carried it for a long time. I am kind of an unusual situation for deployments as an infantryman. Probably statistically speaking, shouldn't be having this conversation with you, right? My Afghanistan deployment in 2012 was far and away overshadows the other three. It was one of the worst ones. We lost a lot of good people, and a lot of good people got hurt. And I was in charge of the talk at the time. So I had been hurt on my third deployment, and still dealing with that on the Afghanistan deployment. Got put in the talk, and now I'm responsible for wargaming for an entire company. You know what I mean? And not having proper equipment or missing something and somebody gets hurt, I carried that shit with me for a long time. So I would argue that is part of your transition, man, because I heard it in your voice when you talked about the what if and those people didn't come home. You're still carrying that with you to this day, and I'm here to encourage you that it's okay to let that go. And what you're doing in your life now is the best way to move past that, and realizing that you're gonna make a life that they would have been proud of you to live. You know what I mean? Because they can't be here to do it. So I would encourage you to let that go, brother, because I know what that's like. I know what it's like to carry that with you. And nobody's here to judge you for your career. I think that it speaks volumes about your character that the day you get out of jail after a DUI, you go straight to the recruiter and you sign up. You didn't quit in dealing with it. You didn't try to get out of your obligation to the Army. You continued to fight to try and reclass, to go back to active duty, to do, to serve that thing that's bigger than yourself. So that obviously speaks volumes about your character. And I don't think anybody's going to judge you for walking away from the Army after dealing with that cash in the reserve unit and them basically sabotaging your entire career. I think that speaks volumes of them as a unit and some changes that need to be made within the military, particularly the reserves. But I would encourage you to let that go. Nobody here is going to judge you, for your career, and I think everybody is going to look up to you for sharing that side of your story. And that's why I started this show is because I promise you, it may feel like it. You're not the only one that's got a situation similar to this. There is somebody that listens to this show that has been through something similar, that's career didn't work out, that's carrying a survivor's guilt, that didn't get to deploy, or whatever that looks like. So I encourage you to let that go, man. And I appreciate and am grateful that you shared that with us.
Yeah, man, I appreciate the words. It definitely, again, I've been through a lot in my life. I've lost a son. That wasn't the only time I'd been in jail. Like I've buried more people than I'd like to admit. I've gone through a lot of different things. And when, especially losing a son, when you sit back and evaluate everything, there's a lesson in everything. There's learnings in everything. There's no situation that's just inherently bad. It could be bad for a time, and it can be hard, and it will be hard. But like, if you're willing to learn from life, like, it's going to teach you. And I would do it all over again, knowing how frustrating it was, just to have that basic training experience to teach me the things that I learned during those 13 weeks were probably the most impactful weeks on my life of any period of change or growth for me of my entire life. It would be hard to argue against the impact that those 13 weeks had, not being the single largest impact of my life. And so I would trade that 1,000 times over for an incredibly frustrating 3 years with a soup sandwich, reserve unit. It sucked, and it was awful, but like, I still got those experiences. I got to wear the uniform. It was crazy. The day we graduated from basic, our flight to AIT was on September 11th. Now, obviously it was many years later, but like, can you imagine
The irony?
being a kid that grew up and watched the towers fall I watched the Pentagon on fire from 25 miles away. Like, it wasn't something completely foreign to me. I knew tons of people that were impacted. Like, it was a very close thing to me. And the first time I got to wear my uniform in public off of a military installation was on September 11th. And theoretically, maybe possibly every drink was paid for that day. You're not supposed, not that we did, but if we would have wanted to, There may have been a major in a bar that had a really cool, view on things and it maybe took care of us. But it was a blast to really be in an airport and have everyone say thank you and talk to you. And I miss that about our country. I miss that about the way we view the military and the way the military is treated. But yeah, man, that was a really impactful day too. Just being able to travel from Georgia to Texas in your uniform on September 11th, the anniversary of the single worst terrorist attack on our country in recorded history. That was definitely a memory that I'll cherish for sure. What I can remember of it, of course.
Yeah, dude. So you decided to, I assume you had the opportunity to re-enlist if you wanted to, right? It was a decision for you to walk away because you're frustrated at this point. And you already said in the transition, you didn't have a plan, your whole thing was sabotage. So how did you discover entrepreneurship? Was it immediate as you got out, or did you do the thing like I did where you work 100 odd jobs to figure out who the fuck you are and completely miserable in that before you're like, no, there's a better way to do this and I can do this my way and that's okay too? Like what sparked the entrepreneurial journey for you, and how did you arrive at Unicorn?
So I've always been an entrepreneur. Always. I was that dude undercutting the vending machines in school. I'd go to Sam's Club and get, the bulk buy on the candy and, undercut the vending machine for, by 60% to make money and whatever. I worked at Chick-fil-A to support my entrepreneurship. Some people want to play for the Yankees. I want to be on Shark Tank, right? That's what I've always wanted to do, is be an entrepreneur. So that said, I was always trying something. I was always hustling on something. My dad will tell you there were $1,000 million ideas that never even saw the light of day because I couldn't get focused on anything. And frankly, I was still, I still was struggling with substances and substance abuse and all of those things. So to answer your question, directly, I was a short order cook. I was I was a valet. I got fired for being a valet because I took a really cool car on a joyride. But hey, how often do you get to drive an Aston Martin Vanquish DB12? I figured what would the harm be, right? So 6-speed manual transmission. I think I'll be back in 15. But I'll never forget. I'd sold my car for drug money and bought a motorcycle. It was a Suzuki some Suzuki 700cc, Harley wannabe. And I'd never ridden a bike in my life. I'd never ridden a dirt bike in my life. I literally bought it. My buddy from the reserve unit I was in, that's how I met him, taught me how to ride it in a parking lot and said, good luck. And I took off on a bike. Okay. So mind you, this is all I have. I don't have the money to buy a helmet. Helmets aren't required in Texas. I hate helmets. I hated them anyway, so I wasn't going to buy them. I didn't have one. I got a job interview, like a real job interview. And it was across the bridge where we live in Texas, 30 miles east of Dallas. There's Lake Ray Hubbard. There's this huge bridge that goes across, and you got to cross twice, and you got to get. And so I'm riding, I'm getting ready for this interview, and it starts pouring.
Never fails. That's how it goes.
So I literally pulled out my golf gear that I had that was supposed to keep me dry. I hypothetically put on my ACH, okay, that I may or may not still have. I put on some snowboarding goggles, and off I went.
Yep.
And when I got there, I was absolutely drenched. I almost died 14 times on the way there because I'd never ridden in the rain. I'd only been riding for 3 months. Like, what is this idiot doing on a major highway in Dallas, Texas? I don't know. But I got there and I got the job. And I think it goes back to that, I had to driven through a tornado to get there. It wouldn't have mattered. I was going to be at that interview. There was no way. Biggest opportunity in my life. And when I say biggest opportunity in my life, it paid $200 a week. Okay. But big commission job. We were cold calling, raising investment money for oil and gas. And I got it. I started. And within 5 or 6 weeks, I made a $10,000 check. right?
So you were good at sales. You're naturally good at
Oh,
sales.
yeah, always been. Like, ask my wife. That's the only reason she said yes, right? Like, I've always been able to sell anything, like snow to Eskimos, condoms to nuns, you name it. I can sell
Yeah,
it, right? Like,
match to the devil.
yeah,
Yeah.
doesn't matter, right? All the expressions. And so, made this huge $10,000 check, and then a $20,000 one came in, and all of a sudden, like, I've got real money. Blessing and curse, right?
Particularly if you had just sold your shit to buy a motorcycle so you could
Yeah,
go do drugs.
yeah, right. Not
Probably not great that you're getting $30,000 in commission checks and you still like drugs.
Yeah, and it kept coming. And so, you know, fortunately, around that same time, I met my now wife, and if the Army saved my wife resuscitated it after I got back, kind of a thing, right? Like, that stopped me from dying, but it didn't put me on a great path. And she's the one that completely got the course corrected. And you know what's crazy? Like, she never made me do anything. She recognized very early that trying to make me do anything is there's no point, right? Like, I'll do what I want when I want, and it's a fault that I deal with, and I'm trying to grow out of that now, even right at 36, 37, whatever I am. But she came along, and she was the first thing that had been worth being better for, you know, like having something that's worth changing for and worth like denying self to get a better gain. It reminded me in a lot of ways of like what I learned. Like, you have to, for the good of the group, you will oftentimes put yourself in a bad situation, and because you care more about the whole than you do yourself, right? And that mentality kind of really started to take over. And not that I was perfect by any stretch, but the drugs stopped. The drinking was still a problem, right? But there was something to live for that was bigger and more important than me. So we ended up getting engaged, getting married, and frankly, you know, I don't know where everybody stands on this, but it's, for me, you know, none of it mattered until I found God, not religion, not church, not some denomination, I grew up very religious, like super religious, right? So none of that. I had to throw all that away. I found God. And I entered into a relationship with him that was bigger than anybody. And she led me to that. Right. And so
I would argue you didn't find religion, you found spirituality.
sure. Yeah. No, it's definitely not religion. Yeah. It's the anti-religion, right?
Yeah.
Like, religion is a problem in and of itself. That is a whole nother conversation. But, you know, for me, Jehovah, God, Yahweh, like that to me, it's different for other people. I get all that. But like, for me, that's where things started to turn around. And fortunately, that also impacted my ability to build a business. And I took what I'd learned in this fundraising world. What we were raising millions of dollars for oil wells in Texas. That, you know, I'll tell you the day I quit that. We were in South Texas on a well site. I watched oil come up out of the ground. I'm talking like movie scene, black gold, you know, the whole thing. And I see the owner of the company get on the phone, walk back over to me and say, hey, call your clients, tell them it's not commercially viable. We're gonna cap it. And I'm like, do what? Like, I
just saw it coming out of the ground. What do you mean it's not viable?
Like, and so I did some digging. Come to find out, there's some really interesting loopholes in the state of Texas and with oil production, and how these companies, a lot of the shady ones anyway, if they don't meet certain standards or flow rates or whatever, like, they can cap it. And then after a period of time, once this 10-year, whatever, I don't know the exact amount of time, but after this time frame has elapsed, they can go back and develop it for themselves, right? And so they were basically building wealth on the back of other people, robbing them blind, essentially. But it's okay because it's a tax write-off, right? Like, that's how they would justify it all. And so I was that, like, while I was down in South Texas, I had one of the owners of the company with me in my truck. I quit. They had all my crap outside of, like, they literally took my office and put it outside in the rain, just sitting there. My wife had to go had to go, my now wife had to go get it and pick all that up. But I tell you that story to tell you that, like, that's where I learned, like, there's a lot of money in the world and people are looking for ways to make money with their money. And I knew a little bit about real estate, but I found an opportunity with a company also based in the DFW area that was doing very similar things, except for on the real estate side. And on the real estate side, it's an asset that you own that's brick and mortar that can't be taken from you. Sure, the market can, we can dive into the financial pieces of all that, but it's a much better investment than oil and gas. Oil and gas is gambling. It's high stakes gambling. It's all
and I compare it. It's scummy sales.
Oh.
I had a foray into scum. I hate sales. I really hate sales. I'm not bad at it. I'm pretty good at it. But I got started selling final expense to seniors knocking doors. So I'm selling an intangible whole life product to people who can't afford to live. And I'm supposed to write business that stays on the books. And I fucking hated it, dude. It sucked the soul out of me. I did it for right at 6 months, and I just never showed back up. I just was like, I'm out, dude. I quit. This isn't for me. Same thing with health insurance. Health insurance, I think, is even a little bit worse because really all these health insurance companies do is change the name of features, change some limits, and then sell you a shittier product at a higher price and convince you that it's great. Then I pivoted to property and casualty, got stiffed on a bunch of commissions. I happen to believe in property and casualty insurance a lot. I don't believe in how the companies operate their sales cycles and the way they charge premiums, but I really do as a product believe in property and casualty insurance. We don't have the money. Most Americans don't have the money to replace a vehicle if something bad happens to it or their house or whatever. But when I got stiff on commissions, I walked away from the insurance industry, picked up a really brief job selling Medicare and Medicaid, and really saw through that bullshit too. It's just another game where they relabel a plan, and it's a little bit less scummy because it's not costing the client anything. I just hate it. I hated it altogether, and that really turned me off to sales. And I've had several opportunities come up for really good sales jobs now where I could actually help people and make a difference, but that left such a bad taste in my mouth. I hate it.
Yeah, and so that I parlayed all that experience, and I would say that what I was doing on the fundraising side of things is less sales and more advisory, right? Like, yeah, there's a sales component, but like really what you're doing is you're trying to help people understand, how to make money with what they've got, and that what you're doing is better, and here's why. And so you really have to be educated on the different asset classes and how financials work and how finances operate, and you have to be financially literate. And so there was a ton of education that was super valuable there. And unfortunately, that company also had a bit of a how do I say it? We'll just call it a scummy side. We'll just leave it at that. And there was a track record in history that had been worked really hard to be hidden. That was found out very quickly. And when I found out, I was stiffed $500,000. I'll just leave it at that. And so
way worse than the $6,000 in commissions I didn't get.
Yeah, we were about to get $1 million bonus between me and my partner, and I shook her hand and thought it meant something. And that was the last time I ever did a handshake in my life. But very expensive lesson to learn. But it was learned. And I took that and I just kept going. Right. And so then I jumped in to the real estate world myself and built a retail real estate brokerage. I was able to sell that. And then stayed in the real estate investment space for a long time. And then 4 years ago, we lost a son. And that was when, there's a big pivot in your life. When something like that happens, you really, have to stop, take stock, evaluate, look at, is life what you want it to be? Because it's shorter than you think it is. And, for us, it wasn't. And so we sold everything and we packed up and we left Alabama where we were at. We moved back to Texas to be with my family again. We came back here, and I live in the same neighborhood with my mom. I'm a mile away from my sister and my 3 nieces, and we're a few hours from my wife's family. They're in Louisiana. Like, we're going to the LSU game next week. And
fuck Brian Kelly. Fuck that guy. What a sorry piece of shit. No character whatsoever.
He can get on a football tangent. I'm sure of it. Roll Tide. But it's, it left me in this spot where like, what do I do? Like, I no longer an entrepreneur. I don't know what to do. Well, I come to find out there's a bunch of like, $100,000+ jobs out there for people that are selling at a high level. And I was like, I want a piece of that action. And so I did. I jumped into the tech sales world. That was my first introduction to tech sales. And I was fortunate to find a real estate technology company that I was able to parlay I have no college degree. I have no professional selling background. Tech is the hardest industry to break into as a seller. And it's really what I want to talk about, with the remainder of the time we have, is like helping veterans do that. But like because
tech sales, the growth of that industry over the next 10 years, it's fucking insane.
It's wild.
It's wild. And man, I get spammed with cold DMs for tech sales daily, all the time. I mean, running out of runway here to do what I do, like tech sales looks kind of juicy. Like not a lot of, time investment, but like also there's a way when you learn that you can structure your schedule around so you can be selling and building and selling and building and bringing in cash and pumping cash into your business. Like I'm with you. Tech sales far and away, and it's so lucrative, lucrative.
So when I met the guy that gave me my first tech sales job, Chris Ray, is now my co-founder at Unicorn, right? That's where we met. And we met, it was 3 years between when we met and when we started our company. But when we met, we just really connected. I worked with him for a while. I moved on. I got laid off. He got laid off right about the same time last November, I guess. So about a year ago. And we just kind of reconnected, started chatting through like what it would look like to start something. And, the problem that we recognized in the marketplace, in the tech sales world anyways, or startup world, I'll say. In startup world, you have a great idea, you have a product, founder typically leads the sales effort for the first 8 or 10 customers. And then they're like, oh, now I got to go hire somebody. And that person that they hire 92% of the time doesn't make it a year, because that particular founding sales role is the hardest thing to do. Not because there aren't great salespeople, but because the companies typically suck and they don't know what they don't know, and they don't know that they're not ready. And they bring somebody in and they want them to cold DM. They want them to stand up a partnership motion, build a pitch deck, do some graphic design work on the side, cure cancer and solve for world hunger. And they're going to pay you $70,000 to do it. And it's like, that guy doesn't exist. That's a unicorn, right? And that's the name, hence the name, right? Is why we named it that. But yeah, so we work with startups of all different sizes, stages, industries, and we help build that go-to-market motion for them. And then we bring in our sales team to sell on their behalf. And then at the point that they're ready, we bring in and we place their permanent sales people, right? And so we use our team as a fractional sales base and the talent to do that. We use our sales leadership, our RevOps shop, all of that stuff, and we build that out. But to your point, and to what I want to talk about, is like tech sales is very lucrative. It's great. Like, go and get a BDR job and start working your way up, right? It's easy, but it's not. It's not. And if there's any industry in the world that is probably the antithesis of the military culture, it's probably the tech world, right? Like, it's kind of nose up. I went to Stanford and I'm smart and I've got, my daddy's the president of the country club and mom, plays canasta with rich women all the time. Canasta is probably a
it's the people game. You and I would have referred to in high school as major nerds, right? The computer nerds, the data scientists, engineers, coders, all that stuff.
I mean, I wasn't rich. We didn't have a pot to pee in, or a window to throw it out of, for that matter. But it's a challenging world to navigate, and it was very frustrating for me when I was trying to break in. Now that I'm on the inside, we are working on some initiatives to really change some things. And one of the things that we're working on right now, and I can't dive too far into it, but working with if I said the name, everyone in your audience would know it. It's one of probably the 4 or 5 most recognizable names in the country. And they have this program where they subsidize companies like ours to help transitioning veterans break into the sales world, right?
There's
so
another company out there like yours called Shift. They've been hard in my DMs lately. They cater to veterans and professional athletes to get them, teach them how to write resumes that speak to these tech sales jobs. Is the one that they push most, but they do like home-based service. They do communications. They got IT, different sales tracks you can go on. It's one of the better programs I've seen out there. I think you're in early on this space for transitioning veterans. It's becoming a huge space as I do more work in it. I'm seeing it pop up more and more. A couple of weeks ago, there's now a franchise team out there that is targeting transition veterans. There's programs out there where you can roll your TSP into the franchise as the down payment, or to fund the franchise. There's all kinds of cool stuff coming up in the transitioning veteran market.
That's a really, that's neat. And it's something I'm super passionate about, right? Like I mean, look, we all know the military, or the Army specifically, my experience with the Army, like not everybody is this like hard charging, like there's a lot of idiots. There are idiots everywhere. There are idiots everywhere. There are idiots. Every sports team you played on, not everybody was the star player. And so let's not just pretend like just because people are veterans, they're great people or great employees. They made a great decision and they served a cause greater than themselves, but there were plenty of dirtbags along the way. So it's not a blanket statement, but for the veterans that come out that have a desire, have a drive, have all the things that they were taught, and they're ready to put those to use, and that like they do make some of the best employees that you'll ever have. They're loyal. They work their tails off. They know how to embrace the suck, right? Which is what startup world is all about, is constant evolution, a lot of hurry up and wait, and a lot of embracing the suck, which is literally the military in a nutshell. And so I think there's a huge opportunity for the veterans that are listening to this podcast. I will send you all of my contact info. We can put that out with the episode. Like, I would love to chat with anybody who is like, man, I'd love to try my hand at sales. I'd love to break in. Like, we're working on some things. There's some opportunity that at a minimum, you can come in, get some experience. If you're just looking, like, we don't have a paid program yet, we're working on that, but like, we do have opportunities to come in and kind of intern, work, study, shadow, be a part of, like, and just learn from the inside out. And there are companies that are working with the veterans that are transitioning to place them in roles. And so it's definitely a great career. It's a great direction. The benefits are great. The pay is good. The hours, like you mentioned, it's all remote now. Let's be honest. Nobody puts in 50-hour weeks from home. They just don't. And the ability to prioritize your time and get your job done in time blocking. You can also block in your side hustles and your other projects and all that, and it doesn't get in the way. And companies are accepting that now. Like, the good ones,
they have to. They don't have a choice, because we're all getting wise to this, and it's like what I just said a little bit ago, running out of a financial runway to continue to do this full time. Looking at a work from home remote tech sales job, which I know is lucrative. I know how to run, a CRM and get in the insurance world. There were companies that I worked for where I would have to make 200 phone calls a day, minimum, period, end of story, with no auto dialer. You know what I mean? So I very much know how to manage that. And if you just make those 200 calls right up front, the rest of the day is yours. Then all you have to do is worry about the people who call you back, the people who answer your emails or your texts for follow-up, whatever follow-up you have on your calendar that day. Make sure you get that shit done, get it done early, and move on. And then come back later that night after you've worked on something else and call all 200 of them again and watch what happens.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's definitely, I will say that it's a lot harder than I thought it was, right? Like, it's not selling enterprise SaaS is a different animal. It is not, they are not, all sales is not created. I used to be that guy that said sales is sales, sales, sales. It's not. That is not true. The guys that I work with, Chris Ray and Matt Farina, we've got some incredible sellers that run some of the most sophisticated sales cycles I've ever seen, that are so far above my head. Like, I've never been in that world. But that said, there are tons of I would say that if you're a veteran transitioning and you're looking, anything that says enterprise, probably not you. Probably not you. Enterprise is that is the big leagues, if you will. Like that's more experience. That's a much bigger ticket, longer sales cycles, more complex and complicated, many stakeholders, multi-threading, all of that stuff, right? But there are tons of great SaaS platforms out there that aren't that enterprise based, that are absolutely in play. And so I think you hit the nail on the head. One of the things I learned, you talk about this company, one of the things I learned was like, my resume is great, but I didn't use the same lingo that these companies used. Like I was calling something, business development, for instance, and they would call it like SDR. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. And so I had to go get the startup thesaurus and like translate my resume from like stupid to, Stanford. And once I did that, I got a lot more traction, but also it's a tough market to get jobs, period.
Well, not only that, but understanding what hiring managers are actually looking at, right? Like I just learned this the other day, but typically in a sales role, a hiring manager is getting so many resumes that really all they're looking for is a summary. And if your summary is not in that language that says I'm prepared to be in this sales role, you get sent to the back of the pile or to the trash can. You're never going to hear from them.
And ATSs have ruined that. I mean, the applicant tracking systems, like they set these keywords up in these ATSs where it's like, if it doesn't say X, Y, or Z, like kick them out. And they'll never even see it. They will never, the AI or the tech or whatever will run this scrape. And if your resume doesn't have this keyword in it, you're out. And it's like,
well, there's a tool out there for vets now that you can take your resume, upload it. It will use AI to translate it into the role that you're applying for. It's actually it's called Best Military Resume. It's founded by Brad Tachi. He's in Japan right now. He's landing veterans all kinds of jobs, sales jobs, federal jobs, all kinds. It's an amazing tool to beat the ATS like you're talking about, because that's the biggest problem. So you take the job posting, you put it into this, it will spin your resume based on certain keywords and what ATS looks for. It's really cool. I should connect you with them.
Yeah.
I think maybe there's some partnership opportunity there, or at least some kind of knowledge that you can gain to pass on to your clients or those. Because I really like your model. Not only are you teaching people how to sell, but you're almost like a staffing agency too, right? Like
there's a component there for sure. Yeah.
And I think that's amazing, man. Like anybody who's out there helping veterans get jobs, and not just get a job, but a job that is going to resonate with them as a person, right? Like tech sales is not going to be for everybody listening to this. Sales in general is not going to be for everybody listening to this. I don't know how you feel about it, but it takes a special kind of person. You have to have really thick skin. You have to have an affinity for going out and getting no's to be successful in sales. The best advice I ever got in sales was be excited when somebody tells you no, because you're one no closer to that yes.
Closer to a yes. Yeah.
100 no's to get one yes. And when you really adopt that mindset and that perspective, picking up that phone and dialing 99 more times, it becomes so much easier. You're like, let me go get a no real quick. Let me just get it out of the fucking way. Let me get that no. And then it's going to be a good day. Right.
Yeah, the other thing about that though is, you're right. Sales isn't for everybody, but like startups just make up job titles all the time. Like they just make up job titles. They're like, oh, the chief snack officer. Oh, sounds good. We'll do it. Well, you got money. And so the startup, I guess what I would categorize what we do as, it's not just sales, right? Like we are a go-to-market shop. So within that, there's rev ops, there's sales ops, there's customer success. Customer success anyone can do.
Yeah.
Customer success anyone can do. And these B2B SaaS companies have to stand up a CS function. So if you are male or female, transitioning veteran, love people, hate sales, start looking customer success roles. Start going to find, the onboarding support managers and sales engineering and
customer success managers, customer journey development is a new one I've seen pop up. That one's, I don't really understand. I mean, I get it. Like everybody's customer focused, so we got to implement programs, but anything that says customer in it is a good fit. I guarantee it.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of roles out there. The startup world is always evolving. It's a great place to be. Like, look, it only takes one to hit a monster, and then you get involved with an exit, and then there's wealth. It's not just a career. There's wealth that's created.
Well, and I wanted to touch on that because you're pushing tech sales. Tech sales is super hot right now. The projections on the growth of the tech sales industry are off the chart. It's unbelievable how much money is going to be made in the tech sales world. One of the things that I've seen popping up too, and they're putting these in job descriptions now. This has a really low base that may not appeal to you, but what you're getting in return is equity in this company. As a SDR, a BDR, or whatever you come on board as. And I don't think people understand how important equity can actually be. That could change your entire life. Do you have any advice for how to evaluate these tech sales jobs and these startups that people may be looking at jobs for, to know whether or not it's a good opportunity to take a lower base and maybe a lower percentage of commissions, but get in on the equity? How do you evaluate companies like that? Never do that.
I mean, not never take equity, but so there's a couple here. That's a great line of questioning. So let me spend a little time on that, right? Like,
sorry, man. I gotta get it out while it's on my head because I'll forget.
That's great. Like it's super important. So let's say you're a veteran, you're interviewing in the startup world. Couple very important things you need to answer, because what they are really, really good at is look, this is their baby. I call it ugly baby syndrome. I don't know. Do you have kids? Like my kid, he's 8. He's really cute now. When he was a baby, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the cutest baby I've ever seen. When I look back at pictures now, like, my son was ugly. It's okay.
Ugly baby.
He was a baby. Babies aren't cute inherently. They're cute because they're yours. And it's like a little pug puppy, like, oh, they're squishy. They're cute. Golly. Like, it's okay. It's okay. They're going to be cute, hopefully. But like right now, they're not. And these people are super fired up about their company, their mission, and that's awesome. That passion is what drives a lot of it, what creates the momentum that allows you to go out and sell. But also, they will hype the piss out of you. And hey, this is about to, this is going to be the greatest company in the world. We're going to be the next Elon Musk. Like, probably not. But like, let's dive into what that means. A couple of things. One, like, they're going to sell you on an OTE, right? On target earnings. They're going to tell you, here's your base, here's your OTE. Typically, if you're a SDR, BDR, it's going to be like 70-30, 70% base, 30% commission. Once you get to AE, it's 50-50, like 120 with a 240 OTE, right? And so some of those are kind of standard. But what a lot of people miss is like the number one question you should be asking: what percentage of BDRs are on target? What percentage of the BDRs actually hit their OTE? Right? If that number is below 60%, like,
run away.
You're not going to be successful there, because they've obviously set metrics in an area where you can't attain them. So first and foremost, don't get sold a bill of goods on the base salary and whatever, commission structure. Make sure that the majority of people in that staff are hitting their commission numbers, because if they're not, you're definitely not going to. Please don't convince yourself, well, I'm better than they are. You're not.
Does that speak a little bit to the product that you're selling and the quality of the product, or the need of the product, or what the product's solving?
No, I would say 9 out of 10 times it speaks to either a founder or a sales leader who's delusional about what they can actually do.
That was going to be my follow-up to that, because it's the same problem I saw in the insurance world, right? Just ridiculous fucking numbers you're supposed to hit. And I'm like, I'm watching this guy close all this scummy business. He's the best guy here, and he's not even on track. Like, what are we doing?
And so it goes across every industry, but in the startup world specifically, it's really, really bad right now, right? Like, they'll give you I saw a job post the other day that had like $140,000 delta in the like bottom of the range and the top of the range. Like, are you serious? You want me to like make a determination with a plus or minus 140 grand? Like, that could be 20 grand or 160 grand, right? Like, that's a big swing.
You guys heard it here first. $140,000 swing. That's a red flag. Stay away.
Yes. It's just like, look, okay, great. I love the package you've put together. Yes, there's a good base salary for a BDR. It could be anywhere from 50 to 80, right? Like that's a BDR base, and you should be able to make six figures as a BDR if you crush it.
Yeah, shift is pushing. I think they said 60 to 80, like you said, and then OTE should put you somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 to 175. Your first year as a BDR.
I would be willing to bet there are a very low percentage of people hitting that number in their first year, but like I'm sure it's possible. That speaks to the heart of the question, right? Like, great. If you tell me I can make 150, I'm down, and I believe in myself more than I believe in pretty much anything. So like I'm betting on me. But also, what percentage of everybody else is hitting that number?
And I love that you're pointing out that question, because that's a question I didn't even know to ask. What percentage of BDRs in your company are actually on target? It's a simple question, and they can't dance around it. They have to give you a straightforward answer, and you'll know if they're bullshitting you because there'll be a big fucking pause before they answer that question, I'm sure.
Step one, before you ever go on the interview, rep view. It's a company that does nothing but like, as people leave and exit companies while they're at companies, rep view, they've built out this incredible, really, really awesome database of like, hey, I've worked here. This is what it was like. This is the culture. This is the pay. So I would always start there, like get your intel right. And then when you go in, that's the question you got to get answered. And it needs to be 60% or better, in my opinion. You can make that determination when you get there. But I would say if 60% isn't getting there. And then the follow-on question to that, if the answer is 50 or 60%, okay, that sounds reasonable. What's the plan for the other 40%? Like, how do you guys what's your policy? Is it a PIP? Is it, is it 3 strikes and you're out? Like, how do they develop talent that's underperforming? That's the heart of the question, because in tech sales, you see layoffs every other day. SDRs and BDRs are a dime a dozen. I hate to say it. They'll lay you off in a heartbeat. And so if you're setting yourself up to go into a bad situation where the majority of the BDRs aren't hitting their plan, they're not on target, 1, you're going to be miserable. 2, you're probably going to get laid off. And 3, you could have avoided it all by asking the right questions up front, right?
Are you noticing a lot of these companies have no plan for how to bring people up to speed?
That's why you have to.
I noticed that throughout the insurance industry. And again, not to compare the two industries because I know that they're different, but it's still sales. And without having some kind of program to teach you how to properly market and sell the product, that was the biggest thing I saw was the training on it. I came in with 0 sales experience. I knew nothing about chargebacks or follow-up or any of that stuff. And in the insurance world, man, it's just a bunch of agents out there trying to build their downline, because you get paid commissions on people that you bring into the organization that builds your residuals, that builds your wealth. So they don't really fucking care. They'll just go out and find more people and sell them on, I got sold on it because it was lucrative as hell. It was more money. I had the potential to make more money in my life than I ever thought possible. That's what really sold me on it. I was like, well, it's not that hard. I'm just going to go talk to people all day. Well, fuck. Yeah, it's way harder than I thought.
Yeah, I would say that developing sales talent is the single hardest thing that any company is going to do. It's also the most important. And really and truly what we're trying to discover with these interview questions is like, what kind of leader, what kind of founder, what kind of culture, right? Like, is this going to be for a vet that's transitioning? You need that brotherhood, that locker room, that supportive, like, yes,
the community. You need the community.
You'll run your solo missions and you'll be great at it. You'll crush what you got to do, but like, you've got to be able to come back to that community and know you're supported and know that you're being trained to standard, that there is a standard, that all of that stuff. And a lot of that stuff in startup world is also a challenge. And I'm not blaming, like, this isn't bash the companies. Like, they're also just startups. If you came into my company right now, I don't know that I could tell you that we have a great plan for people that, like, I'll be honest with you, it's a really challenging thing to do, but it is information that you need to ask when you're interviewing. Now, to get to your question about equity, right? Like, equity is going to the casino and putting it on black or red, right? Like, there's an element to that where, like, if you go statistically look at the amount of companies that actually have an exit, let me stop and back up. The only time that equity has any value whatsoever is at some type of capitalization event, right? There's either an acquisition or an IPO.
Yep.
That's pretty much it.
That's it.
There are literally no other paths for that equity to make you money, period.
Yeah, it'll never vest if you don't do one of those two things.
Yeah. And so it's like you can be fully vested with, 1% of a great company that never gets purchased or IPOs, and you've got 1% of nothing, right? Like it doesn't make an impact for you. So when I talk to people all the time, like equity is the carrot for sure. And to evaluate the company, I mean, look, you look at their ARR and how fast they're growing and what their churn is, what their retention is. Like, ask them, what is the exit strategy? Like, what if equity is a part of your offer, then you have the right to ask, like, what is the equity? Like, what's the exit strategy for this? Like, what is the game plan for basically you to make my equity worth something? I'm going to come bust my butt. I'm probably working for a little bit less money because you're trying to give me equity. So how are you going to pay that off for me? Like, how are you going to pay that off for me? And that's a completely fair question to ask. But I always tell people, like, don't ever count on equity. Mm-hmm. Don't ever take a job for equity. Equity is a plus that you should get by you're taking a chance on an early stage company that may or may not work. And that is why they're giving you that. They shouldn't be giving it to you because they can't pay you. They should be paying you and saying, hey, if you're willing to take this ride with us, even though the company might go belly up in 6 months, like it may go belly up, it may be, I may be the next Mark Zuckerberg, who knows? But if you're going to take that ride with me, you deserve to be a passenger alongside in the cab, not riding in the bed of the truck, right? Like, you should get in on that action with us because you're going to be a part of this crazy journey, and it's going to suck and it's going to require a lot of time and yada, 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 right? So that's why equity exists. So I was one of those people that got really excited about equity really early. Like, oh man, I could think about this. This could be the next Zillow was the one I was a part of. And it was like, meh, 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 meh. Like it didn't matter. It never did anything. And I busted my butt for free for a long time. So do with that what you will. But like, definitely as veterans, I think we're predispositioned to like get really fired up about that type of stuff. I don't know what it is, but like most of my buddies that are vets are like, they buy into that stuff. Like, they're like, oh yeah, I'm a part, because you feel a part of it. Now you're like a partner. You're involved. You're like, you own a piece of it. It's your company in some small way. And I think we all have this desire for that community, that ownership, that being at the table, that being a part of the group. And so I have
a theory behind that. I think it's because most of us who join come from nothing. We don't have anything. And these aren't possibilities that we ever saw, for at least in my case. I never saw that as a possibility for myself. I never thought that I would have opened some of the doors that I've opened. I never thought that I would have a podcast where I get to talk to other entrepreneurs. I never even knew that I would be an entrepreneur at all whatsoever. Right. Like, so, I think that's largely where it comes from, and I've fallen victim to it. You've fallen victim to it. You're right. It is the carrot, and you're going to get the stick 9 times out of 10. You're going to get the stick 9 times out of 10.
I would even say the shaft, but it's not going to feel good either way. But yeah, it's definitely something to be cautious of and to just be hyper aware. Like, know your value. I think my biggest challenge was I felt that why would they hire me? Like, why would they hire me? I don't have the background everybody else has. Like, for those of you listening, I have no college degree. I have 0 professional sales training. I was literally an entrepreneur I've worked for myself since high school. Like, at Chick-fil-A, even in those roles where I told you about these jobs I had, I was a 1099. So I did not have any benefits until I got married, and my wife, who's a physical therapist, had benefits. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I never had work provided benefits. I never was a part of any of that stuff. I didn't feel like I deserved it. I didn't feel like I was worthy of it. I didn't feel like I had the background for it. And then when I got in there, I realized, like, none of these people have what I have. Like, I'm the difference maker. Don't get me wrong. If I brought Matt Farina in here right now, he would sell circles around both of us. But like, he he's the only guy. He's one of our he's one of our partners. And he came, it's a great story. Came from Miro, top seller at Miro, got burned out, came and helped us build this thing from the beginning. He's like, he was built for the military. He just never went. Like the dude is just a hard charge in. Like the dude just never stops. But like he comes alongside me. He's been teaching me like the more intricate selling techniques and the more sophisticated sales plays. But like he and I are not created the same. I have different skill sets that only were created by my experience and what I've went through and what I've done. And being from the school of hard knocks, there's value in that. And more companies nowadays are starting to acknowledge it, which it's not nearly enough. And I'm on a freaking crusade until I can get this, like, entrepreneurs, veterans, people from alternative backgrounds will always make the best sellers because of their lived experience. Sales is a connection business. It's, can you authentically and genuinely connect with this other person, Adam, on the other side of this Zoom call or this video screen? Can I make you believe me, trust me, and want to buy from me? And then ultimately, does what I'm selling solve a problem that you actually have, right? And if you can do those things, you can sell. And if you've been on deployment in Afghanistan, having to meet with the local villagers, and you've been in country having to navigate these challenging interactions and engagements where, oh, by the way, they might have a gun and try to kill me, but also I'm trying to build schools and I'm trying to make their life better and I'm trying to do you've had to establish more real relationships and do more authentic relationship building than anybody did at Stanford or anywhere else, right? And so
don't add in the element that you don't speak the language.
Right. Like, it's so just, I don't know, man. I just hate hearing veterans talk about themselves like, oh, well, I'm not qualified for that. Like, you know what? You might not be on paper. That's okay. I've never been qualified for any job I've ever gotten in my life. And I'm certainly not qualified to run the company that I'm running now. And I seem to be figuring it out. Right now, I've got great people around me and I've got smarter people than me. I'm never the smartest person in any room I walk into by design. I surround myself with people that are smarter than me, that are different. They may vote different. They may believe different. Like, I do not put myself in echo chambers. I don't put myself in people that all look like me, that all, like, I surround myself with the most diversity humanly possible so that I can learn as much as humanly possible so that I can be the best that I can possibly be. And if I continue to do that, it'll continue to work. It's not always been easy. Look, I'm not wealthy. I haven't had some big breakthrough yet. I'm hoping that we're onto something here, but it's still a struggle. It's still a struggle. I don't have my kid's college figured out. He's 8 years old. Like, I'm starting to think about how am I going to buy him a truck? Like, I don't want anyone to sit here listening to me think, be like, oh, this guy's got it figured out. Like, I literally started this company after being laid off with a little bit of nothing, essentially. Like, I mean, didn't have a lot on the bad side, didn't have a lot on the good side. I'm pretty much at square zero, right? I was able to, when I sold my company, I was able to get out of debt and do some other things that allowed us to some level of freedom. But there wasn't a lot. When I say I had an exit, people are like, oh, you sold a company. I'm like, I mean, I sold a company, but it didn't have 3 digits before the comma. I promise you that. It wasn't some, it wasn't even $100,000, much less, so I don't know. People just, I think there's especially with the LinkedIn culture we're in now, everybody's a guru, everybody's successful, everybody's sold a company, everybody can sell you a product, everybody can, and I'm over here just I'm telling stories about going to jail and my son, pooping and peeing in the potty when he was a kid. And I'm just trying to connect with people. If you want to sell people something, go for it. That's your thing. But I think what we can do differently is we can tell about our life and our experience and what we've done and who we've been and what we've been made into, and people will lean into that. And so that would be my encouragement. I know we're running up to the end of the time here. So my encouragement to veterans would just be one, build a brand on LinkedIn. If you're not doing that, you're wrong. Period.
Everybody should have a personal brand, period.
If you're not building a brand on LinkedIn, you're wrong. If you're not leaning into your military background on LinkedIn, you're also wrong. I know that a lot of us don't like talking about things that we've seen, and I'd say that I didn't get to go, but I'm empathizing with you. I get it. Hard to talk about certain stuff, but you came through that for a reason. You're here for a reason. What you've learned, what you've done, how you've served our country, you are a hero, whether you feel it or not. People want to hear from you. I'm not saying go out there and tell people you're a hero. Please don't do that. But get out there and share your heart with people, share who you are, share what makes you you. The fabric of you is what your personal brand is. That is literally the personal brand. It's the fabric of what makes you you. For me, if you go to my LinkedIn page, I've grown from I hadn't used it since college a year and a half ago. And now I've just crossed 6,000 followers. I picked up 100 this week already. Like, I am really focused on LinkedIn. And if you go look at my content, you'll find maybe 2 out of 10 is a business post, maybe. The other 8 are my observations on life, my life lessons that I learned, my battle with drug addiction, I've had 14 major surgeries because I rode it hard and hung it up wet for a whole lot of years. And college sports were tough and the Army was tough on the body. And I didn't even have to do anything, and so on and so forth. Right. And that led to a pill addiction. And I share all of that stuff on a professional network called LinkedIn. And those posts outperform anything else I put up.
Yep. I'm in agreement with everything you just said. First of all, build a personal brand. You don't even need to know what you're selling yet, but start building a personal brand, because at least you're going to open up your network. I, like you, in a year, it'll be a year on November 5th. I went from 92 followers on LinkedIn to I think we're at 5,300 this week. Whoa. I'm growing at like 22 a day, which is kind of counterintuitive, thinking, the nonprofit work I do to end the 22 a day. The opportunity that has come from just putting myself out there. And like you, I'm very authentic in everything that I put out. I don't put out a bunch of bullshit. I wouldn't say 2 out of 10 posts are business posts, because I always put a nod back to the Stronghold community, which is now free in all of my posts, because I think it's important to get a bunch of veterans in one place that's not a Facebook group, that's not toxic, that, particularly are coming from a platform like LinkedIn, where people are motivated and driven to be better and do better for themselves and their families. And I genuinely echo everything that you said, because authenticity is the new digital currency, period, bar none, end of story. Because I'm authentic, I am connecting with so many powerful people. I just had a meeting with a former Secretary of Defense right before this podcast. I've had Delta Force warriors on my show. I'm constantly getting pitched on ways that I can partner with other people in the veteran space. I have been offered franchises. I've been a myriad of things that I shouldn't, be sitting here telling you about, because, a poor kid from Indiana, shouldn't be experiencing these things. And it's because I got out of my own way. I put myself out there and I started telling real stories about real things that I've lived through, and that resonates with people. And it's so, so powerful. Zach, brother, dude, thank you so much for being here. Tell everybody where they can find you. I hope that they all come to you as just a reprieve for somebody who's going to steer them in the right direction, even if they don't know anything about sales. I feel very confident in your ability to help them and place them in a spot that'll lift them up and not have them have the same shitty experiences in the sales world that we did. I think what you're doing is amazing. So I want to make sure everybody can get back to you and reach out to Unicorn.
Yeah, look, here it is, 469-838-7926. That's my personal cell phone number. You can text me, you can call me. I don't do that frequently. And then I realized it was literally on our website. So why not? You can reach me there. You can go to our website, salesunicorn.com. Unicorn has no O. That's a little challenging, but I can't spell. Sorry, made a mistake.
But what it is you couldn't get unicorn.com as the domain name. I know what that was.
I couldn't get either of them. So I went with what we got. But I absolutely, man, I love what you're doing. I would love to stay involved. And truly, when I say this, I mean it. Anyone who is trying to figure out what next steps are in the professional world, like I don't know that I can find you something. I don't know that I can, but I can definitely be a resource, and I can definitely connect you with a lot of people. Our team gets 1 million impressions a week on LinkedIn right now. And so like, we're really, really working on connecting and trying to connect as many people as humanly possible. So if I can be a resource to anyone in any way, whether it's addiction or jobs, like I've fought it all. And so, yeah, I would love to be able to give that back to those who have served our country in the greatest way, man. I really appreciate what you're doing, and I appreciate you having me on.
Dude, the pleasure's all mine, man. It's super grateful you volunteered some time to sit here and talk to me for an hour and a half and put your story out there. And the vulnerability that you displayed is exactly what I'm looking for, man. You are an example and a leader in this space, and I really appreciate it. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, I give to you Mr. Zach Walker. Please don't forget to like, rate, review, subscribe, download. Help share this. Just share the fucking episode. I need to get this in front of 1 million veterans before I turn 40 on May 9th, 2025.
Whoa.
Yeah. There's 19 million veterans in the United States. There's no reason my podcast can't reach every single one of them.
That's
There's
fair.
no reason. There's no reason. I think it's a lofty goal. We're way far from it, but I'm going to keep saying it until it fucking happens, because we need to come together as a community and help each other out. There's no competition here. I promise you there's plenty to go around. The internet's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. So there's somewhere for you to fit in to get your piece of the pie. So please help us do that. Until next week, we'll see you. Take care, everybody.